Hi guys, welcome back to Chess the Matthew. So on this video, I will show you on how to win in the AMAR chess opening in just 8 moves. So the said opening start with the first move of knight to h3. So we shall see that after knight to h3, it controls the external center on the f4 and the g5 square to the territory of black. Although this is team on the rim which only controls 2 squares rather than for example after the move knight f3 in which his powers was maximized on controlling more square on the knight f3. But still after knight h3 I able to win in just 8 moves because after here my opponent plays the move d5 with an intention to capture my knight on the h3 and doubling my h pawn on this position. And also after d5 it controls the center, so here I counter the center with e4, and here my opponent think for a while and tries to go for with the two ideas, which for example after he doubled the pawn and he wants to win a material on this position after it takes d4. So here he plays first the bishop takes h3, doubling my h5 after g takes h3, and after t takes h4 we shall see in this position that the black has a material advantage with one pawn up on this position. And here I try to regain that pawn deficit with a move of knight to c3, and after the black plays the move knight f6 I play the queen to e2 to have two attackers versus one defender. And here my opponent here just play the move queen to d4 and tries to defend the pawn on e4 with two defender versus two attacker. And here I can actually forcibly take back that pawn deficit on e4 with the move bishop to g2. But here I just play the move queen to b5 check. Before we go on that variation, let's say for example here the suggested move of black here is just to play the move knight to c6, because here I cannot actually capture and regain easily the pawn on e4 because there is just knight to d4. And after for example after knight takes, g takes, and queen to c4, depending the pawn on c2, but there's just queen to d6 with the idea of after for example a normal move of bishop to g2 intending to castle on the king side, there's just queen to e5 check. So here for example, if my opponent just played the move king to f1, and I can timely castle on the queen side to defend my pawn on b7, and also putting my rook on an open file to control a lot of square to the enemy's comp. And here, for example, if my opponent plays the move d3, a normal move which develop his dark square bishop, but it is a blunder because there is queen to e2 check, and after king g1, queen e1 check again. So the only defense here left is to cover, and after rook g8 check again, after bishop g5 rook takes g5 checkmate because there's no cover and capture and even escape to the check. So going back, for example after I move queen to d from my opponent, instead of playing the move knight c6, the suggested move here on this position is knight c6. And even though the white will not go for knight takes e4 and plays bishop to g2 instead, but there's still just knight d4 intending to have a fork on c2 and regaining the pawn. And after a defense of queen to d1, there's just queen to d7, and after knight takes the pawn, regaining the pawn, but there is just knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, queen e6, pinning this bishop on e4, and after a defense of d3, but there is just f5, winning a piece on this position. So the suggested move here for black instead of queen to d4 is knight to c6, because it puts a poison on the pawn on e4. And here after the move queen to d4 from my opponent, I simply just play the move queen b5 check instead of bishop to g2, because after queen to g5 I have two attacks on the king and on the b7 pawn, because later on after the pawn will drop then the rook will follow. So here if my opponent plays the move queen to d7, I can capture now the pawn. The suggested defense on this position is knight b to d7, because after queen takes b7 there's just rook b8, and after queen takes d7 and a6. Although I am a pawn up on this position, but there's just 3 island on the white's position that puts a weakness focus on the white perspective, and later on he can manage to develop and castle and complete his development. So still in this position, even though the white is a pawn up, but it doesn't matter because it compensates the positions that favors for black. So here, after the move queen to d7, I capture now the pawn on b7 with intention to capture soon the rook on a8. And here, he tries to defend that rook, but it is over now after queen to c8. It is checkmate after the 8 moves because the king cannot escape the check, and there's no cover, there's no capture. So it is already now a checkmate. So just a recap, in just 8 moves I win in the AMAR chess opening after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to subscribe.